The stones were actually planted last week on Wednesday, May 22nd. The stones are about 6 to 8 inches wide, so they're not huge. But when they were planting them, I noticed that they were 2 to 3 feet deep in the stones themselves. And they're planted in cement. You should have seen the people who were digging the holes. I felt bad for them. It was the hottest day of the year. But the point I'm making there is that these are permanent. They're not meant to be taken out. That they'll be permanent reminders of the history and also the humanity of Phyllis and Peter. Ironically, the day, May 22nd, that these stones were planted, turned out to be the exact date that Phyllis and Peter were married. And we didn't plan that. You discovered that in your history and research. And it just struck us all at the end of that day how big what's taking place here is and how significant the research and study that you all have done in your middle schools. And we're truly grateful for the guidance of the Witness Stone Project and for those who have helped. I wanted to thank Matthew Hess from Rogers Memorial Studio in Enfield. They know how to plant gravestones, and they did that for us for free, voluntarily, and they were the ones out there digging those holes, so I especially wanted to thank them. Also wanted to thank the Long Meadow Middle Schools, the middle school choir that will be singing later, Mass Humanities, the Massachusetts Cultural Council, the Long Meadow Historical Society, the Witness Stones Project itself, John Thomas, our soloist from First Church, who will be singing in just a moment, Bob Heim from Custom Concrete in Suffield, who embedded the brass plates in the stone. We welcome today and grateful for the support of Superintendent O'Shea, Representative Brian Ash, Senator Oliveira. We give thanks that Dennis Culleton, the founder of the Witness Stones Project, is here with us, and Pat Phineas, who has spoken both to our church, the community, and the schools, and she's the chair of the Witness Stone Project and somebody who benefited greatly by her discovery of her own roots and family identity through the research that has been done. Now for the invocation. May this ceremony be blessed, and may our community be blessed by our participation in the Witness Stones Project. May it help us all to confront the racism in our past, the racism in our hearts, and the hope we have for a more diverse and just future. Amen. The song that now will be sung is an African-American spiritual. It was sung by slaves to keep their spirits alive during challenging times and the trauma that they faced. Some believe that it had coded language used to communicate subversive messages, calling people to freedom, not just eternally, but also temporally. In other words, where they were seeking freedom and hope in the midst of their struggles. John Thomas is a soloist here at First Church and a good friend, and we give thanks.
Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. I looked over Jordan, and what did I see? Coming for to carry me home. A band of angels coming after me, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. If you get to heaven before I do, coming for to carry me home, tell all my friends I'm coming too, coming for to carry me home. Sweet low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home. Swing low, sweet chariot, coming for to carry me home.
Thank you so much, John. That was beautiful. Good morning. I am Helene Houston, chair of First Church's Adult Education Team. We work together with our social justice team to bring witness stones to Longmeadow. I would like to briefly review the timeline of this important program, and I stress brief. In 2020, our former pastor, the Reverend Pam McGrath, gave a powerful sermon addressing the church's pre-Revolutionary War history and the presence of enslaved people in Longmeadow and the early church. Coincidentally, the Longmeadow Historical Society was studying the diaries of our very first pastor, Reverend Stephen Williams. Reverend Williams identified 16 enslaved people by name. These are people who attended the church, were baptized, and sometimes married in the church, all while being owned by Reverend Williams and other Longmeadow residents. In many ways, the history of the church is the early history of Longmeadow. The church served as a meeting house for the community. It had a proud history and has had a proud history for over 300 years. In 2021, the adult education and social justice teams presented programming that addressed racial inequities and debates about reparations. We learned that the first step of reparations is the acknowledgement of our church and community history. In May 2022, the Say Their Names program in our sanctuary was coordinated with Melissa Sobolski of the Longmeadow Historical Society. This program began identifying and honoring the 16 named enslaved people from Reverend Williams' diaries. April 2023 was our first joint meeting with the Longmeadow teachers to discuss the collaboration of the Longmeadow Public Schools, the Longmeadow Historical Society, and the First Church of Christ, UCC, and the participation in the Witness Stones Project. Dennis Culleton shared the history of the Witness Stones Project with us at that time. But I want to give credit to Doug and Marika Burt, who are supposed to be here, and I would like for them to stand up. They what? In the balcony. Oh, they're in the balcony waving. They're longtime church members and supporters, and they discovered the Witness Stones Project on a visit to historic Deerfield. Doug Burt is descended from one of the earliest residents of Longmeadow. And if you go out to the cemetery, you see this gigantic stone, gravestone with Burt on it. That's his family. In September 2023, the Longmeadow Public Schools were awarded a Mass Humanities grant to pursue the curriculum of the Witness Stones Project with the middle school students. Longmeadow is the first town in Massachusetts to win this grant. In February 2024, Dennis Culleton, the founder and executive director of the Witness Stones Project, introduced the program to the community in our Bailey Hall. here as part of our Meeting House lecture series, and it's in Bailey Hall where all your beautiful work is displayed today. Today we will unveil the first 2 of the projected 16 witness stones with the intention of continuing our collaboration with the schools and Historical Society for several years. Thank you so much. I'd like to introduce Melissa Sobolski, our historian.
Thank you. Thank you, Helene. And thank you to Pastor Doug and First Church Adult Education and Social Justice teams for providing the space here today for the students to share their work. My name is Melissa Sobolski of the Longmeadow Historical Society, and I am a parent of 2 Glenbrook Middle School graduates. So I am happy to see so many middle school students and their teachers here today. Since I was a student myself, I have always had an interest in local history, of long ago times and places that were familiar to me. It's the stories and experiences of people who lived in different times than I did that most interested me. I am not ashamed to admit that, like many of you, I always assumed that slavery was an issue that didn't impact the places where I'd lived in the Northeast, that it was a Southern problem. My textbooks never mentioned it. That is why it is so important that Longmeadow teachers Tracy Bradshaw and Pam Kangemi chose to take on the work of writing the grant applications to bring the Witness Stones project into their students' classrooms to supplement and enhance the 7th grade curriculum. In the winter of 2021, I began keeping a Google Doc, collecting names, dates, details, and sources of information about slavery in Longmeadow. The Diary of Reverend Stephen Williams, the first minister of this First Church, has been the foundation for much of that work, along with church and town records, wills, and probates, and newspaper databases. I built on the work that earlier Longmeadow historians and my colleagues at the Historical Society had begun. Today, that document, that Google Doc, is 109 pages long and growing. Just last week, Al McKee and I found an exciting lead while moving old town records from the basement of Town Hall. A 1795 town tax assessment list included a man identified as Peter Negro as having paid his 73-cent poll tax, indicating that he was a free black man with voting rights. He paid no taxes, so he apparently owned no real estate or livestock, but he did pay that 73 cents for his poll tax. There is a story in there, I am sure. But today is about the stories of Phyllis and her Peter, her husband. They both lived, though separately, right here on the town green. They were married right in First Church here on the green on May 22nd, 1744, as Reverend Doug said. Last week, the same day their stones were placed side by side outside was their anniversary. There are no coincidences. This hints at divine inspiration and intervention. I will let the students share more about them. Look around you, students, look around you. This building has been sitting on the Longmeadow Town Green since 1767. Phyllis and Peter were in this building. I ask you to take a moment and turn and notice the balcony. The southwest corner of the balcony, this side. That was the Negro Gallery. That is where they sat. And today I feel their spirit with us. And I'm so grateful that you, with the help of Ms. Bradshaw, Mr. Golan, Ms. Kangemi, Ms. Crandall, Mr. Wills, and Mr. McGinley, and your other teachers are helping to restore their humanity by telling us their stories. But none of this would have been possible without the Witness Stones Project. That this curriculum exists is a testament to the dedication of another lifelong educator from our neighbor state, Connecticut, Dennis Culleton. Because of the framework he has built from the ground up, students have learned about and memorialized the lives of more than 250 previously hidden figures in their communities. When we know better, we do better. Our students now know better, know more about the complex relationships within their own community during the formative years of our town, our state, our nation. This work matters as we strive to raise good citizens. Students, I firmly believe that you will carry the messages of this project forward into your future years at school and beyond. And with that, I introduce Dennis Culleton of the Witness Stones Project.
We didn't know that Patricia Phineas would be able to join us today, and so she's not in the bulletin, but we're really glad she's here with us.
And you've already met her. So my name's Dennis Culleton. About 7 years ago, like Melissa, I gave a presentation about slavery in the town I was living in and teaching in Guilford, Connecticut. And afterwards, a friend of mine, Doug Nygren, went to Germany and came back and said, could we remember enslaved people the way Jews are remembered, where a stone is put in the ground, where they lived freely before they were kidnapped and murdered during the Holocaust. That's called the Stolperstein Project. And from that, I say, if you bring a sore knee to a surgeon, he or she will want to operate. You bring an idea to a middle school teacher, they're going to want to make an educational unit out of it. So that's where the Witness Stones Project came from. But through the work of the Witness Stones Project, we get to see and understand and find information about enslaved people who lived, worked, and worshiped in our communities. And sometimes those stories are tough to read, and sometimes those stories have hard history in them. But oftentimes, or most times, we see a story of agency and resistance. We get to see the humanity and the decisions and the lives that enslaved people lived. I remember doing the research or working with the researcher on Phyllis and seeing how her relationship with Reverend Williams changed over time, and realizing that it wasn't because he changed all by himself, it's because she was able to change him. And that the decisions she made, like getting married and having children, were decisions that she made without necessarily the approval of people around her. So although she was held in the chains of enslavement, she was an individual and lived the life, or at least part of the life she wanted to live. So I really appreciate the perseverance of the members of the church group that came and visited us, visited Deerfield, and then visited my friend Bill Sullivan, who's here, and the work he was doing in Suffield with the students at Suffield Academy, and invited myself along with the teachers and Melissa to say, could we do this here? And it was a big stretch. Not that the information wasn't here, but to really bring the curriculum into the classrooms in Massachusetts is different. Massachusetts is different than Connecticut, no matter what people 3 or 4 miles away will tell you. And I'm from Massachusetts, so but I'll say that slavery is different in every region, in every state, in every county, in every community, in every household. So to be able to tell the story of enslavement here in Longmeadow has been both a challenge and a privilege. And I appreciate everybody who's invited us to the table. The leap of faith from your teachers to say we can do this here has been very important. And I just want to say how much I appreciate it. And I'm now going to introduce Pat Wilson-Phineas, the chair of the Witness Stones Project. And again, you guys probably know her story better than I can tell it. So.
Good morning, everybody. I really just wanted to thank the students and the teachers for the work that you've done, because it's hard to start from nowhere, to take the history and to make it understandable, usable, and to appreciate it in the way that you have. I could tell from the notes that I got from students that they have enjoyed just even the beginning of this work, and I can't wait to talk to some of them now that they've completed the work, and I really can't wait to see the products that have been produced in the probably poems and stories and pictures that you all have written. I want you to know how much it means to me personally as a descendant, because there are so many. I am one of the few lucky ones that has my history. And I have that history because of Dennis Culloden and the Witness Stones program, because as some of you probably know, before there was a Witness Stones program, there was Dennis Culloden looking at things in Guilford and finding information and tracing it down. And part of that information he found were Phyllis and Montrose, who happened to be my 6th great-grandparents in Guilford. And from those grandparents, he traced all the way to me and found me, and subsequently when the Witness Stones program was founded, I became its first board chair. But as I said, the curiosity that you guys and ladies showed, the interest, makes me feel so proud of you, and so proud of the history that I have that so many people don't. There's nothing unusual about my family. Nothing really unusual at all, except that we have the history of it from the very beginning, from 1727 right up through my own granddaughter, Kaya, who's your age, at 12, well, she'll be 13 at the end of the month, and now she has this history because of this type of work, and I'm very proud of it and you. So thank you very much, and best wishes.
I promise we're getting to the students very soon. I just have a few things to share. I just wanted to share a little bit of the background of how we got here. Helene did such a wonderful job in tracing back the last several years, but I just wanted to take a look back at the last year and a half for Pam and I in Longmeadow Public Schools. So I have lived and taught in Longmeadow for nearly 30 years now. I've raised my own children here, and they've attended the Longmeadow Public Schools. In fact, I live a short distance from here, and my daily walking route is around this beautiful green and First Church by the homes with plaques of Bliss, Colton, Eli, Cooley, and more. And as a Williams Middle School teacher, I've spent years taking students on a walking field trip to the green to share the history of Longmeadow. Until recently, I had been unaware of the presence of enslaved individuals who once lived among us. Names like Peter and Phyllis, along with many others, had been omitted from the narrative. It was about a year and a half ago when I received a phone call from Marika Burt, who has been an important part of our school's annual field trip, sharing our town's history with our 7th graders who would be seated right here in the church as we are today. Marika called to invite me to a social justice meeting at the church where Dennis Culloden was invited to speak about the Witness Stones project. Pam Kanjami and I attended the meeting, and when we left, we looked at each other and said, we have to do this. So with funding from a grant from Mass Humanities, we were able to realize this project. It's been an amazing collaboration among the schools, the church, and the community. Now, I walk the green with a renewed commitment to share the complete history of our town, a history that includes all who have called Longmeadow home. It's only by confronting the uncomfortable truths of history that we can truly come forward as a community. So let us honor the lives of those who came before us, both the celebrated and the forgotten, as we strive to build a more inclusive and equitable future for all who call Longmeadow home. Our students will soon present their projects. This represents the culmination of researching the history of slavery in New England, the primary documents noting Peter and Phyllis, and the background and history of Longmeadow. After a few thank yous that I feel I need to do, I'll let the student work speak for itself. There are many people to thank who have been an integral part of making this day happen. So thank you to the Social Justice Committee of First Church, specifically Marika Burt, who have given their time, energy, and steadfast dedication to this project. To Reverend Doug for his guidance, commitment, and good humor throughout this work. Through his leadership, we will continue to honor the lives of those we have forgotten. Thank you to Mass Humanities for providing the grant money for this project through Expanding Massachusetts Stories. Simply put, without this funding, we would not have been able to complete this important work. We'd like to thank the Longmeadow Historical Society, specifically the contributions of Melissa Sobolski. Her countless hours of research and her quick response to emails cannot be overstated. We wouldn't be here without you, Melissa. We'd also like to thank Dennis Culleton from the Witness Stones Project. It is his vision and life's work that also brought us here today. And thank you to Pat Phineas for traveling to join us today. We're so grateful to have shared your family's story with our students and our community, and we're so happy to have you back. And finally, thank you to the Longmeadow Public School teachers who have spent countless hours creating lessons and implementing curriculum, and to the administrators who have supported our work on this project. Thank you.
Okay, it's now time to share the students' work. I think you'll be amazed, not only here in the sanctuary where they will share their research and their reflections based on the work that they've done on the Longmeadow Witness Stones project, but wait till you see the work down in Bailey Hall. So without further ado, I would like to, we're going to start with introductions of Peter and Phyllis. That will be done through biographies. The biography of Peter will be read by Adrian Osterman Soto, and the biography of Phyllis will follow. That will be read by Sumaya Sheikh. After that, Myra Sharma will recite her poem entitled Memories.
Imagine a world where owning people was not just accepted, but encouraged. You don't have to imagine, because that harrowing world is our past. All over the world, humans were kidnapping, buying, selling, overworking, and punishing those they considered less than human. Peter was an enslaved person who lived in Longmeadow back when it was a precinct of Springfield. Like so many others, he was imported to the Americas via the triangular trade system. In this economic system, people in Africa were brought to the coastline and sold to European merchants, who would ship and sell them again in the Americas. We don't exactly know how Peter arrived to Longmeadow. He could have been sold in New York, Boston, or elsewhere. But all of that is just an inference, because we have so few documents about Peter's life. He met his enslaver once he was brought to Longmeadow against his will. His enslaver was one of the wealthiest men in town, Captain George Colton. Peter and fellow enslaved person Caesar worked on a large farm owned by George Colton. The farm was so immense that in the tax assessment of 1751, George Colton paid 300 pounds sterling for it, after an abatement. Peter worked as a farmhand, meaning that he worked on the farm with plants possibly including corn, pumpkins, squash, and more. As evidence from the tax assessment of 1751, we have proof that George Colton owned farm animals such as oxen, cows, horses, and pigs, so Peter likely worked with those too. Peter was baptized on July 13th, 1735, though it's highly probable that George Colton forced this baptism. A few years later, Peter met an enslaved person named Phyllis. Phyllis was enslaved by Reverend Stephen Williams. After a while, Stephen Williams mentioned in his diary that Peter and Phyllis had a desire to marry. Though Peter and Phyllis's marriage was not accepted in the community, and many frowned upon it, that desire became reality on May 22nd, 1744, when Peter and Phyllis got married in this church. Unlike most married couples, Peter and Phyllis did not live together. They continued to live in their respective enslavers' homes. In 1758, Captain George Colton composed his will. In that will, he states that, "I give to May, my wife, and my son Timothy, my two Negro men viz, Peter and Caesar. Instead of granting Peter and Caesar freedom, he decided that they should be inherited, even after death. When George Colton passed, 2 years later, George Colton's son Timothy decided to move to Brimfield. After May's death, Peter went to George Colton's daughter Sarah, who at the time was living with her husband, Sergeant David Burt, in a house that still stands on the town green today. On February 17, 1774, Reverend Stephen Williams wrote in his diary about seeing Peter in a low state. He talks about visiting him in Sergeant Burt's home. There, Reverend Williams prayed with Peter, and he asked God for Peter good health. This hints that there was a minimal level of respect given to enslaved people. By no means does this justify any part of slavery, but it does suggest humane treatment in this case. Peter, in September of that same year, dies in his room, in the attic. His death is described as very suddenly and almost alone. We might not have known anything about Peter's life, like so many others enslaved individuals. Few records of their lives remain. We are thankful to the work of Melissa Sobolski, who helped us restore Peter's humanity so we can remember him now.
During colonial times, enslaved people were common in households, even here in New England. Enslaved people were sold and taken away from their own homes and families to work relentlessly for their masters. It was a brutal and harsh system used by many people here to profit in America. The enslaved were considered property, less than a human. The enslaved rights and freedom were taken away. The enslaved were listed as property in taxes, wills, and more. The enslaved were also stripped of their dignity, pride, culture, humanity, and even their names. If the enslaved did not obey their enslavers, there were many consequences, which included being whipped or worse. If we know only a few important events that occurred during Phyllis's lifetime, and no details about her life before her enslavement. However, Stephen Williams held a diary that contained some of the details. Phyllis was an enslaved person owned by Reverend Stephen Williams, who lived in Long Meadow, Massachusetts. Phyllis likely was born in 1713. There is perhaps a possibility that she had been traded from the Caribbean without her permission. Phyllis was baptized on February 17, 1733, by the Puritan Christians, and perhaps it was against her will because the religion was forced upon her and other enslaved persons by the Puritans. The Puritans' belief was to marry first before having children, but Phyllis had a child out of wedlock. Phyllis may have had a child with Peter, enslaved by Captain George Colton on June 11, 1730. For 2 years, 1737 and 1738, she requested to be married to Peter. Reverend Stephen Williams, his wife, and the town did not support Phyllis and her marriage. We can infer that Phyllis kept bothering Reverend Stephen Williams to allow her to get married to Peter because he wrote about the marriage situation in his diary 3 separate times. This seems hypocritical because when two people have a child, they feel obligated to get married to each other in Puritans' belief. But Stephen Williams was hesitant to let Phyllis get married to Peter. This led to a lot of distress. 6 years later, permission was granted for Phyllis to marry Peter. The church record doesn't even record their names. Instead, it states a certain Negro male sent by Captain George Colton, his servant, and a pretty Negro girl were married, May 22nd, 1744. Although Phyllis and Peter were married, they were not able to live in the same house, since they were enslaved and had to work for the enslavers. We can assume that they didn't see each other often because they were probably busy doing their work. During her lifetime, we can imagine Phyllis's main job was to run the household and take care of the children. Phyllis's death took place on May 28, 1774, likely due to a stroke or seizure. Although her death did not appear in the church records, the diary reveals that she had a funeral that many people attended at her death was mourned by Reverend Stephen Williams and his family. This suggests that she was respected many in the community. Writing about Phyllis's death, Stephen Williams seemed remorseful about the way he treated Phyllis and his other enslaved people. He wrote, "The Lord be pleased to pardon my deficits, duty toward her and my other servants deceased." Today we are honored to restore Phyllis's history and honor humanity.
Good job.
From shores From shores where seashells gently lay, from waves that make the ocean sway, Phyllis lived, her spirit bold, in lands where sugar cane unfold. In tropical islands, her roots did cling, beneath tall palm trees where coconuts swing. Their fronds reached high to touch the sky, longing for freedom, unable to fly. Captured and taken to distant shores, far from her home, with burdens heavy, she pressed on, through toil and sweat, when hope seemed gone. Beside her stood her Peter true, their love enduring, strong and true. A son they had, their pride and joy, their bond unbroken, no one could destroy. Yet chains of bondage held them tight, to laws unjust, to an endless night. Baptism's waters forced upon, a soul denied, its freedom gone. On May sad eve, she took her leave, her spirit now in peace, believe. In Stephen's arms her memory lay, of tribute to her resilient sway. Phyllis, now in freedom's embrace, in realms where pain can find no trace, her legacy, a guiding light, through darkest hours, shining bright.
Good morning. I'm Cara Crandall, grade 7 English teacher at Glenbrook, and I'm here to introduce our 2 final pieces of student work. First, Raina Kim will read her poem, Phyllis's Story, which explores the relationship between the enslaved and the enslaver. And then co-authors Logan Mallet and Ryan Brosnan will read their historical fiction piece that imagines a day in the life of Phyllis, Peter, Captain George